Finally got your first leadership gig, loving the new role, but feeling the pressure of your new responsibilities and all that expectation to perform? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Crossing the chasm from a technical role to leadership, from doing stuff to managing and leading people, is the toughest challenge any leader must make. Welcome to the Human Edge Show, the podcast dedicated to help you do just that, successfully cross the doing to leading chasm. Campbell Such here, Chief Chasm Crossing Guide. I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. I want to help you learn those lessons much more easily by sharing my experiences and talking with brilliant people who have already figured it out. You'll get great actionable tips, strategies, and techniques to make the transition so much easier and faster for you. Now let's get to it. Well, welcome to the Human Edge Show. I'm Campbell Such, and today I'm super excited to have Andrew Nimick on the show. Welcome, Andrew. It's great to have you here.
Awesome. No, thanks for inviting me along. I'm really pleased to be here, Campbell.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrew. Really glad you could make the time this morning. Andrew's had a varied career path from rifleman in the British Army through health and safety and into technology, where he found he was good at building strong software delivery teams. Always excited by the opportunities of technology, Andrew now focuses on the human side of the innovation equation, helping others become more effective in teams or in leadership. This can be as part of a transformation, in coaching, in agile, or helping organizations move to digital. A big advocate for DevOps, which is where I first met Andrew in a seminar on DevOps with Red Hat, and agile. Andrew has spoken at a number of conferences on these subjects. So welcome, Andrew. So just to kick off, what's something that not many people would know about you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, and I'm afraid I'm a little bit of an open book. I probably share too much, but it made me laugh the other day. My son was kind of whinging about something, and yeah, a lot of people, I eat the vegetables that other people don't like. So broad beans, Brussels sprouts, and believe it or not, cabbage. But I have to say, of the three of those, broad beans, I love them. Absolutely love them. Don't know why, just do.
That's absolutely fantastic, Andrew. I know in the conversation we were having before we started, we talked about some of the previous podcasts, and one of the guys, Oliver Hill, from the country manager from HP, is allergic to broad beans. So,
life wouldn't be worth living. You can just send them all my way then.
There you go, Oliver. Somewhere to send those broad beans when you find them. So just looking back over your career, Andrew, what led you into leadership, and how did you feel in your first leadership role?
I think, actually, thinking back over it, I think my first leadership role, so although I was an NCO in the Army, and one of the things I discovered when I got given stripes on my arm was that before I had stripes, I used to ask people to do things and they just kind of did them. And then as soon as I got the stripes on my arm, people resisted. And it was like, oh, okay. So I had to kind of work through that. But I think what I think of as my first real leadership role was actually a voluntary one. I somehow stepped in to become a scout leader. And ended up as what back then was called the group scout leader, which means I was responsible for all the activities in the hut, if you like, for all the age groups. And that taught me an awful lot. Someone else I was once talking to said that he felt that having been in leadership for many years made him a better parent. And I think actually having to look after children in a scouting context made me a lot more empathic and a lot more attentive to what was really going on. So there was, I really enjoyed it, picked up a whole lot of ways of looking after people or working with people that maybe is missed elsewhere. So it was an interesting one.
Really interesting comment about getting your stripes and having people resist. It's an interesting thing around human psychology, isn't it? Is that if you
it is. Yes.
if you have to do something, you just don't want to do it. And so as a leader, if you can find your way around that, people feeling they have to do things, perhaps stuff becomes a little easier for everyone, the leader and the people doing things.
Well, there was a thing that I was once told when I was in the army, was that and I'm not 100% sure of the truth of this, but the idea is that if an officer has to give an order, he's already failed, or she. But when I was in the army, there was, you know, very few female officers. So yeah, when an officer has to give an order, they've already failed, which is an interesting way of putting it.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because we think of the military as being command and control, but actually my fairly shallow, I guess, experience with military people in terms of the way they run organizations and the research that I've done, it would appear that the best leaders don't run command and control in organization, in the military. And that matches up with what with that idea, right? That concept. Yeah. So yeah.
It's one of the reasons I fall back on a lot in my experience in the military when I'm explaining Agile, which we could go into either here or another podcast another day. But yeah, it's the command and control thing really breaks down, or not breaks down, but is perceived in error, I would say.
Yeah, you can order someone to do something, but you can't make them want to do it, right? And that's I guess that's one of the key differences.
Yeah.
So looking back across your career, were there any epiphanies that particularly stood out or stand out for you when you look back? Things that made a big difference to you?
Lots probably, but yeah, I think one of them was and I was thinking how to explain this earlier this morning, and it's you know, my word, when I came up with the Venn diagram, my goodness, we love our Venn diagrams in this business, don't we? You know, where would we be without 3 interlocking circles? It's like, you know. But I was thinking, you can have. Someone once asked me, "What's the difference between a manager and a leader?" And I'd actually say, and this is where the Venn diagram comes in, is, you know, a lot of people have written pieces on this, and, you know, and tried to make out there's some huge difference, and actually there isn't. Because a good leader uses a lot of good management skills. You can have a good manager who's not a good leader. You can have a good leader who's not a good manager, and you can have a leader who's a manager. And so, you know, it's one of the things is in there is don't automatically paint people with the same brush. Don't kind of, you know, go for generalizations in that respect. So, you know, and you can have a leader who really paints the path, where we need to go, how we need to get there, and they have all the details, but they really do need someone else who does all the running around and managing and making sure all the pieces kind of are where they are, because, you know, that's not the person's thing. So, you know, I suppose that's probably the point there, is a good leader actually makes sure that they know their weaknesses as well as their strengths, and puts someone in who can help them fill those parts.
Yeah, that's great. That's really powerful. And the fact that you can have a good manager and not be a good leader, not be able to paint the path, and a great leader that's not a great manager. And how would you painted a picture for what you see as a leader around painting the path and taking people on a journey. How would you paint the picture for a manager as distinct from a leader?
In what? I'm not sure I understand. So if you were the manager, how would you paint the path? Or
no, so a leader is someone with a vision that takes people on a journey. What is a manager? Yeah. And how does that compare to a leader?
I think the manager is the person that makes sure everything gets done. So they're focused on they're focused on the here and the now and the operations and the activity.
Okay.
You know, again, maybe it's framed a little bit. So one of the devices that was used is used in the army is the sergeants. There's an old saying that the sergeants run the army. And what that is where the officer is thinking about the strategy and how we do this thing. The sergeant's making sure that everyone's got their ammo.
Right.
And they've all got what they need and all of these bits. They take care of the admin as well. So I think that's the difference to me is you know, fundamentally. And like I say, you can get leaders who are good managers or managers that are good leaders. But I think that's the difference, is their focus is getting stuff done. And I've worked with people who just absolutely blow me away on their efficiency and their effectiveness and their focus on detail, you know. And I'll be honest, you know, sometimes I'm kind of already over here going, we're going this way. And they're like, hang on, we haven't got the things lined up first. So, yeah.
And perhaps one of the keys coming out of that too, which has been one of the epiphanies in my career, is just around working out what it is that you're really good at, your strengths, the things that you're good at and you like doing, and try and build more of that into your role and less of the stuff you don't like doing. So if you're a great leader and you don't, and the doing the detail stuff isn't for you, then find someone else who that's their strength, and work with them to build a partnership that can really help both. In terms of one of the biggest challenges with a lot of organizations, and if you look at the Gallup stats, the decisions that we make to hire people into leadership roles are mostly wrong. Gallup says 82% of hires into management roles are wrong. I mean, it's just an astonishing statistic.
But it's not changed in years.
What as a technical person, having become an expert in whatever you do, a software tester, a DevOps manager, a help desk person, and then trying to make that decision about where you go next. Do you go into leadership or do you carry on down a technical role? Do you have any thoughts around how you might, as a leader, assess whether the people in your team and the people that report to you are better suited, you know, talking about strengths, are better suited to go down one path or the other, and then help them work out for themselves whether or not that's the right decision, and then encourage them on that path?
Yeah, it's an important aspect of leadership. I coined a phrase when I was at NZME, was mentor the mentors, which basically meant that the approach I took was I would spend mentoring time with my leadership team, helping them to be able to mentor their people so that they could identify who would be their replacement in their squad if they left, you know, so that, if they were offered a better job somewhere or whatever, or just, you know, career progression, etc., they could give me that name. They'd say, this is the person I think could step up. And I think it's spending time in order to understand that and be able to make those decisions. I think we have a flawed approach, and I'll be honest about this. I was discussing it with a friend the other day. I think we have a flawed approach to the way that we do one-to-ones with people, the way that we progress people. And I think a lot of it is down to the fact that we don't spend enough time with those people. So if you think about it, if your engagement with a member of your leadership team is a possible once weekly or once fortnightly one-to-one, where that ends up as a discussion about what are you working on, not what are your aspirations and problems, then, you know, that can easily lead to the wrong decisions, because the metric that you're using to make a decision about who to hire and put into a management role is based on, you know, the amount of activity they're doing. You don't really know what's the impact they're having on the people around them. Have you observed them with other members of the team? Have you seen that they actually are the ones that typically will step forward to help another member of the team? You know, so are they good at the job, and do people respect them? You know, activity isn't a measure of good at your job. It's just a measure of that you've got lots of activity going on. So, yeah, and I think that's one of the things I look for. We mentioned another mutual acquaintance earlier, and one of the things I did when hiring him was I actually watched the members of the team that would be reporting to him. So I actually had them interview him because he was brand new to us, and I watched how they engaged with him. Now, I'd watched how they'd engaged with the 3 other applicants that they'd interviewed, and I chose him because when he spoke, they all leaned in. So what that told me straight away was that he engaged them, they respected what he had to say, they immediately would follow what he was suggesting to do. And that's exactly how it worked out.
Yeah.
So I think the metrics we use for moving someone up from a doer to a manager are a little bit skewed, and that's clearly what the Gallup polls tell us as well. Yeah. And too many organizations give someone a management position so that they can give them more money. We know where that ends up too. So it's not a good approach. I don't think. Anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's a really double-edged sword, and it cuts both ways as well. So the organization wants to recognize that person and give them more money, and the only path they've got to do that is through moving them into leadership and management, which they may not be particularly well suited for, but they were really good at their job, and therefore you want to recognize them. And the other challenge with that, and I've seen it plenty of times, is that you put someone into a management role that really thrives on doing stuff and the shiny things and getting stuff done, rather than being really focused on helping achieve things through other people. And you put them into a world of pain, and ultimately it causes problems for them. It demoralizes the team that they're leading, and generally what happens is they leave and go back to a technical role in another organization because there's no path back within that organization, and you've probably lost your best person, which is in the team, which is just bad all round, right? And all the costs associated with that. That's fascinating. So in terms of your one-to-ones or the interactions that you have with a team, what would you suggest as a leader of leaders, or just as a leader who has direct reports that are getting things done? How do you manage that process so you get to know them better as a person, how they interact with other people, how effective they are? Do people lean in when they listen, as opposed to just checking what they've got checked off on the list and working out when the deadline, whether or not they're going to hit the deadline for the next 3 projects that they're working on? What changes would you make to that process to make it as effective as possible?
That make time. That sounds bizarre, but I know so many people in senior leadership roles or even junior leadership roles whose calendars are absolutely awful, and they're just in meetings all day long. And nowhere in there are they actually making time to spend actually with their teams. So, and I know I'm not the only person that does this. I actually listen to a podcast, Stan McChrystal. I sometimes listen to his leadership podcasts as well. Interesting people he has on, but he had a lady who was a CEO in the retail industry. And, one of her comments struck me was that the COVID lockdowns killed her leadership style, because she would spend time walking the floor, talking to people, and breaking down those barriers. And I think that's one of the things, is make time to actually go and sit with your teams. Even if it means kind of, plonking yourself down with your laptop and doing some work from there. And just hear what's going on around you, just be able to observe it. But one of the things I've advised other people to try, which worked for me, was always when you go away and you come back to your area of work or where your teams are, always do a circuit, always walk through them. And that's what this lady was saying as well, was she always does this, always take the longest route possible back to your desk so that you actually can hear what's going on around. You can come across those conversations, and just making sure that you're grabbing 20 minutes, 5 minutes every day to actually just stand or go for a coffee with your leaders and change the nature of the conversation, so that it is a how's family, how's things going, what are you struggling with, etc. But don't ask them. And this again comes back to, in Agile, we're huge fans of the visual management boards. You should know what work they're working on, because it's transparent and it's available to you to see, not because you have to sit down and go through a checklist of what are you working on. If it's up on the wall what the team's doing, why do you need to have that conversation? You can see it at a glance. So use other ways to deal with that question, so that you can focus on the what do you need from me question.
Yeah. Wow.
Which
really
I think is one of the most powerful questions that a leader can ask is, what do you need from me? Because, you know, that's what you're there to remove obstacles.
Yeah. Wow. Set the vision, set the path, get them heading down the path, and then clear the way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
wow. That's fantastic. Andrew, in terms of a new leader, what advice would you give to a newly minted leader who's just come from a technical role and is now looking at this big leadership hill to climb, where they've come from the peak of, or near to the peak of, a technical expertise where they were the kingpin, and now they're looking up going, well, gee, where do I go from here? What are the key things as a new leader you could advise that leader to focus on that might help them get a good start up that hill?
I think one of the first things is sit down and write a little list of how do you want to be as a leader? So what are the good examples of leadership that you can see around you? You know, is there someone you know, or someone you might not know, but you know a lot of, who's an inspiration, who's someone that you want to model yourself on? So find that role model. You know, what are those attributes of their leadership style that that resonates with you, that you appreciate? And it's also not a bad idea to find yourself a negative role model. What are the attributes, behaviors of someone that you don't want to replicate? Because that's always a good check and balance to keep yourself on the path. And then think hard. Was there a mentor that you were engaged with in the past that you can work with, or find yourself, if you can, within your sphere, a mentor, someone who can coach you in leadership, someone who can ask some questions and keep you on track and get you to think differently about your challenges. Someone who's actually removed from your chain of command, because then they can bring a totally fresh perspective. And and even sometimes, and it comes back to, I think, my experience of organizations in New Zealand has been that we don't invest in our leaders enough, and we don't support them enough in terms of training. So, ask your manager, your leader, ask your senior if they're willing to help you find a mentor. If that means paying someone to help you, go for it. Because, at the end of the day, they can say no, but they might say yes.
Yep. And have you, that's very sage advice. Having someone that's been there, done that can help you as a sounding board, as a coach and mentor, because I see them as being slightly different roles. One's a sort of more of a telling role, whereas the mentor's more of an asking role. So, and would you suggest that you said outside the chain of command, so that could be inside the organization or outside the organization, presumably?
Yeah.
And would you have any suggestions around you've talked about go to your boss and ask if they'd fund it if it's a paid for thing, but a lot of mentors, it's not a paid for, it's an arrangement that's someone helping someone else, perhaps as they've further through their career looking to give back. What would you suggest or do you have any suggestions for how you might go about finding a mentor and asking the question in a way that they're likely to say yes? What would you have to offer a mentor to help you?
There are a lot of people, I've come across a lot of people who are totally happy to help somebody else in that way. It really will come down to the how much time are you going to spend kind of thing. But there are a lot of people that you can meet. Either you probably already know them. LinkedIn's a great way to connect to people. The event the Lion does, A Few Quiet Yarns, is a great way to meet people without that actually is taking away the what do you do. So you actually get to meet someone who resonates with you, potentially. So there's lots of mechanisms. And then even if it's just, trust me, it's worth it if you buy them a coffee. you know, or treat them, you know, ask your mentor, can I buy you breakfast once a fortnight or once a month or something? You know, and if you make it, you know, if you, and just keep it very informal. You know, even if it's just a friend who is someone that you can, who you know is more experienced, and you can ask them, look, can I just use you as a sounding board? But I would really appreciate it. You know, your partner, even people overlook, they don't think, you know, but look at what your partner does. You know, why did you choose to be with that person? Will they actually ask you some hard questions if you, you know, if you put it there? So there's lots of different ways of doing it, I think. And sometimes keeping it informal is really good. If you're paying someone for mentorship, then it needs to be a lot more of a formal arrangement. You know, there's certain protections you need to put in place around privacy and everything else. So, you know, that's a thing to factor in. But yeah, you might even find it's somebody within your organization who you could reach out to. You know, a manager from a totally different department.
Yeah, no, that's great. And buy them coffee or buy them breakfast and keep it informal. They're the key messages I'm getting from that. Yeah. Andrew, in terms of, sorry, say that again.
Just find a way.
Find a way. Yeah, that's right. So in terms of your experience, what are the biggest mistakes do you think that new leaders, bosses, or the leaders of leaders make when they put new leaders into their, especially into their first roles from a technical role? What are the mistakes that those leaders make that might make it more difficult for that new leader to really get over the hump or get over that big chasm that they've got to climb from where they were technically to the leadership role, and maximize their chances of success? What could those leaders do to support that process?
So I suppose the first thing is, did the promoting manager, the promoting leader, the person that's created this new junior leader, did they read the room right? Are they throwing them into a position where actually you're going to get the situation I alluded to earlier, where, you know, put stripes on my arm and everyone pushed back? So, you know, is there going to be resentment from people in the team because they got the role, you know? And so have you laid the groundwork for why you've chosen this person? Have you actually given them, you know, the support of making sure that everybody knows that, you know, they are acting as on your behalf, you know? And that's one of the things, that a young leader's authority doesn't always come directly from the young leader. It comes from the person above, you know? So, you know, when they say something, they are speaking, they're speaking for you. Is that the message that's got across? That may sound a little bit command and control-y, but it is true. You know, leaders in an organization reflect the leadership at the top. They may have their own different style, but you're all trying to pull in the same direction to achieve the outcome set by the senior leader of the organization, the CEO or whoever. So it does kind of roll down that way a little bit in that respect, you know. And also, if the organization has chosen to make someone a manager or a leader, then, you know, sometimes it's up to the other people around who've just got to kind of suck it up and get on with it, and treat that person with the respect that the organization wants them to.
Yeah.
So I think it's prepping the ground. Have you done enough to prepare the people around this person to support him or her? You know, have you drawn out and explained their strengths and their skills and why you're giving them this role and this opportunity?
And that's to the rest of the team that you've perhaps promoted them out of, so they can understand what your thinking was and why you've done what you've done. Mm-hmm.
And again, if you've spent time observing that person in that team, that's going to be a lot easier. So the prep goes back again to, have you really observed that person in that team?
Yeah.
Or have you just done a one-to-one with them?
Yeah. And then I guess one of the other challenges too is, of course, as a leader, you put a new leader into that role, but you may have a number of other direct reports. Could be more, could be less, plus a whole bunch of KPIs, plus a bunch of projects, plus the rest of your exec team, and the rest of your role that makes making time to support that new leader a challenge. But I think going back to your earlier comments, making the time would be one of the key things. Would that be right? Or do you have any other thoughts around what that leader could do or should do?
That's it, because it's the first hurdle that I find for so many people is making the time. If you can make the time, then the other bits start to fall into place. But that's the first hurdle, is actually fighting the myriad of demands on us. To actually go, well, what's the most important thing here? And to be honest, the most important thing is if you put somebody into a junior leadership role and you don't support them, then their failure is on you. There's no two ways about it. It's not on them, it's on you, because you're their leader.
Yeah, that is powerful. That's something to really consider as a leader who's put someone into a new role. And because so often you hear stories of new leaders that are in the sink or swim. They've just been thrown in the deep end and expected to succeed, right? And it's no wonder so many of us as new leaders really struggle and don't get the support that could really make a big difference. Yeah. Andrew, just before we wrap up, this has been wonderful. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have?
I suppose no. I think the one thing I would want to reiterate, if I may, is that notion of, if you're given the opportunity of becoming a leader, find that role model. Who is, or can be more than one, but what is those attributes? Who would you aspire to be? And why? Understand exactly why those attributes resonate with you and why you would want to emulate those things.
Andrew, that's fantastic. Thank you for leaving us with that wise piece of advice. It's been a great chat. Really enjoyed it, and I hope to have you back on the show again at some point in the future. Thanks very much. We'll see you later.
Thanks a lot, Campbell. Take care. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you have a friend or a colleague who would benefit from this episode, please pass the word along. If you have a friend or a colleague who would not benefit, but you haven't been in touch with them for a while, give them a call. iTunes reviews are great to get the word out and to help me create the show that's most useful for you. And if you're frustrated or having challenges or would like some help, guidance, assistance with your first leadership role, then check out integrationcatalyst.com in the link in the podcast notes below. Or pass this on to your boss to nudge them to get you the help you really need to cross the doing to managing chasm and get you powered up on your leadership and management journey. Oh, and if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, hit subscribe. Until next time.